morning at the bridge to the Coast Guard Island, my friends, fellow colleagues, UCC ministers, Reverend Deborah Lee, Reverend Penny Nixon, and Reverend Jorge Bautista stood in the road. When federal agents pushed through, one walked right up to Jorge and shot him in the face with pepper spray. He had to go to the ER. The news called him, one news source called him a demonstrator in religious garb. As if the collar were a costume. I mean, I know, it kind of is, but as if showing up for justice was theater instead of vocation. And I keep thinking about Luke's gospel. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? And the Greek word here is pistis, which, look, I didn't name it. That's the ancient Greek. Although I'll admit, when you get pepper sprayed in the face, I'm really pissed. Does capture the theological moment pretty well. Good way to remember it, but pistis isn't about anger. It's not intellectual belief. It's not checking doctrinal boxes, but covenantal faithfulness, persistence, tenacity, grit, trust in the flesh, skin in the game, that shows up in bodies, and if needed, bodies that get pepper sprayed. So let me tell you about the woman who started this trouble. She's the widow in Luke's parable, which is to say, she's a nobody. In first century Palestine, women didn't get legal standing. Widows had no voice that mattered in court. Just this one woman who knows in her heart something that this judge doesn't want to hear. She deserves justice. So she shows up day after day, knocking on his door, knocking. Grant me justice, again and again. You know this woman. She's the one that won't let it go. Can you think of anybody you know? Who keeps emailing, who shows up at every single council meeting, the one who makes you think, oh good, here she goes again, right before you realize she's absolutely right. Now the judge neither fears God nor respects people, which is biblical code for completely insulated from any accountability. And Luke, again, the context, he wrote this in 80, 90 AD for communities living under the brutal military empire, the Roman occupation. His first readers knew this judge. They knew this judge in their bones, in their gut. They lived under governors who could crucify you for speaking up, who taxed the poor to enrich the empire, who neither feared their God nor respected their people. Sound familiar? Let's tell the truth about this unjust judge, this current administration, and this system, this empire that we're living in. And it's not just in this country, it's bigger than that. Last week, I named some of these realities, but since some of you are at St. Mary's serving, I want to lift up a few of them again. This empire, which neither fears God nor respects people, federal overreach, military in US cities, family separation, refugee programs shut down, 10,000 people stranded, trans people erased from federal policy, budget cuts, Medicaid, SNAP, rates about to surge for healthcare premiums, tariffs, a tax on the poor, while billionaires get richer. White Christian nationalism, Caesar's religion, dressed up in Christ's clothes. And here in Oakland, 60% renters, cuts mean homelessness. Sanctuary cities, federal raids mean neighbors disappearing. Unhoused populations doubled. Cutting services means people dying in our streets. But this widow does not go away. Jesus uses this rabbinic argument that's called kal wa-homer, from the lesser to the greater. If even an unjust judge responds to persistence, how much more will a just God respond to the persistent cries of the poor, of his people? But here's what we miss, I think. Jesus isn't just teaching about persistence in prayer, asking God for what we need. Jesus is teaching about power, about how systems crack under persistent, united pressure. Keep showing up, and systems will crack. And then Jesus asks that haunting question: will he find such faith on earth? Will anyone still be showing up? The widow embodies such faith, persistence, covenantal faithfulness. She's not begging, she's demanding what's owed, what's just. Justice she knows in her heart. And here's where the story deepens. Luke's community would have known something we sometimes forget. Centuries earlier, the prophet Jeremiah wrote to the ancestors living under Babylon, that empire, temple destroyed, priesthood scattered, every structure that had mediated God's presence gone. And in that devastation, Jeremiah gave them God's revolutionary promise: I will put my law in them and write it on their hearts. In other words, it's Reformation Sunday, no more gatekeepers, direct access for everyone, from the least to the greatest. It's revolutionary. So when Luke's community heard Jesus tell this parable, they would have heard this echo. Jeremiah promising this covenant written in our hearts, unmediated. And here's this widow living, embodying that promise. She doesn't need priests or temple authorities to tell her she deserves justice. She already knows. Which brings us to this moment. Not only in 2025, but right here in our personal lives, right here in this faith community. Back in March at our visioning retreat, we asked, why are we here now? What is our purpose? What's written in our hearts that we cannot unknow? And this is a review. Some of you were here last week, some at St. Mary's, but we need to keep lifting up what's left when institutions are gone. It's what we have, the covenant written in our hearts. We lifted up 4 answers. God's promise taking shape in us. We said, we follow, and we were very specific about this, in the ways of Jesus, not the religion necessarily created in his name. We were we wrestled with that one, remember? Jesus, the refugee. Jesus, the person of color. Jesus, who proclaimed, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself, the Shema. He took the best of Judaism In other words, no other gods before me, Yahweh, the unnameable one. No other gods, not Pharaoh, not Caesar, not presidents, not kings, not nations. No kings. It has a whole different sound, doesn't it? When Herod sought to kill him, King Herod sought to kill him, his family fled to Pharaoh's Egypt. So when Jorge Bautista, who's also first generation, stands at the bridge for immigrants threatened with deportation, that's following in the ways of Jesus, a refugee, a person of color, and not white Christian nationalism. We also lifted up, and this is very related, God's prophetic inclusion. The Spirit falls on all people, from the least to the greatest, and we have so many examples. That includes grandmothers, so don't think it doesn't mean you. I think of one woman Jim and I know pretty well, Margaret Gordon. She's 78 years old. She didn't need a seminary degree to know that West Oakland's pollution was wrong. Or there's another grandmother we know, Karina Gold, who's the founder of Sagoriate that we support with reparations. She didn't need permission to start returning Ohlone land to its people because she knew in her heart, God doesn't rank people, and neither will we. And this isn't about charity, it's theology. And the third, we lifted up invitation to a deeper faith, because we need deep roots in these times, right? When everything's dismantling, we need really deep roots in our faith. The faith to keep showing up, knocking on the door like those Girl Scouts, knocking on the door like that persistent widow, with nothing but our vision, day after day, year after year. And something I think we might have overlooked in the visioning retreat, but we need to return to again and again, particularly now, is stewardship of God's gifts. And here's what we're learning about stewardship. It's not just stewarding the truth, it's stewarding our capacity, our resources, our people, ourselves. Some of us are exhausted. Raise your hand if you're exhausted. Come on. Oh, it's just me, I know. It's always just me. I'm always whining, I know. Legitimately overwhelmed in 2025, right? And there are many persistent widows. We don't take this literally, right? Metaphorically speaking, among us. Some of us are trying to be progressive pastors in such time. Some of us, the 4 people currently serving on our council, Skyline Community Church, serving beyond their terms, they're persistent widows who are legitimately overwhelmed, trying to not only serve on council, but trying to help fill ministries, scrambling to also manage the preschool together that we own, manage events that are all facing ever-increasing challenges, and seeking to reduce our $11,000 a month deficit, and wondering how long can we keep going, which is a monthly deficit. Those of you who are quick with math, you can calculate that's $132,000 a year. And it's depressing. Not for some people in Silicon Valley, that's like one trust fund kids gap for a year in Europe. But we're a church. So we're funding it with rummage sales and concert fundraisers. The economics are stunning. The widow teaches us this. She knows when to show up. She knows when to knock on the door. And she also knows when to knock on the door for help. Because she knows she can't be everywhere at once, and she cannot do it alone. Stewardship also means asking hard questions. What gives life now? What drains life now? What's core to our mission now? What needs to end now? Who are we asking to be the widow now? Is that fair? Is that sustainable? Stewardship means telling the truth and acting on it, including the truth that all of us are finite, under-resourced, and need to choose. But the good news is that this movement is older and more eternal than the universe. It will outlive us all. We don't have to save everything. We just have to be faithful in what we can actually sustain. Back to this Thursday morning at the Coast Guard Station Island, Jorge Bautista wasn't alone. There were many of us, including one woman I spoke to, Maria, a DACA recipient, who stayed much longer than I did. I was there too, carrying apples and bananas and power bars. I was so eager to build bridges. We couldn't get anywhere near the ice guards, but I thought that was an important kind of way to bridge. And Thursday evening, the Trump administration decided not to send the National Guard. Not because he or his administration somehow became enlightened in their hearts, a change of heart, saw the light. There were other factors, some of us know. Silicon Valley billionaires, AI folks. But I do believe our collective persistence helped. And so I want to go back to Margaret Gordon because I think of her when I think of the persistent widow. Even though she's not a widow, I don't think. She has been refusing to give up on the quality of air in Oakland for 50 years. That's 5 decades. Margaret Gordon, 78 years old, a small Black woman in West Oakland with no institutional power, just 14 grandchildren, including several with asthma, sit on her windowsills from diesel trucks. 5 decades she's been knocking at the door of City Hall, demanding justice for a community where children are hospitalized for asthma rates 88% higher than the rest of Alameda County, where life expectancy is at least 10 years shorter than here in the hills. 50 years, that's longer than most marriages, longer than most careers, definitely longer than any of us have stuck with a membership at a gym. Margaret Gordon has been fighting for clean air since 1975, before Star Wars, before the internet, before we knew what email was. Think about it. Margaret was already knocking at the doors. Why this disparity here in Oakland? Back to reparations, redlining, the same racist policy that built wealth in these hills trapped Black and brown families near the port and freeways, concentrating pollution there. Margaret didn't need anyone to tell her this wasn't right. It was, and it is, written in her heart. But here's what matters. Margaret didn't do this alone. She founded West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. She was part of a very broad and diverse No Coal in Oakland coalition, including Reverend Jim, our friend Reverend Ken, me, our green team, this congregation, faith groups, environmental organizations. Many persistent widows have power when we unite together. The widow in Luke's parable is one woman, but she cannot be the only person fighting for justice. And what happens when we ask one widow to carry the whole movement? She breaks. What happens when we ask church council members to carry operations beyond their terms? They break. What happens when we, Skyline Community Church and Preschool and Event Center, in these challenging times, try to be everything to everyone with an $11,000 a month deficit? We break. The movement is eternal. Individual people and small faith congregations like this are not. When developers tried to build a coal terminal in West Oakland, Margaret and the coalition kept showing up until Oakland City Council banned it, because we represented the people. 80% of people in Oakland didn't want it. They still don't. And as you know, the developers sued. And last month, after 10 years of legal battle with the most profitable, largest law firms in the country, the developer won. And guess what? That widow keeps knocking. Many widows are still knocking, including some of us right here. Because the widow, those of you who like to read the scripture carefully, doesn't win in verse 3. She keeps showing up. Verse 5. After persistent showing, even after losses. Coal trains could start running through West Oakland by 2028. It's not very long from now. And UC Davis research shows they'll cause higher rates of heart disease, asthma, hospitalization, and death. Margaret's grandchildren's lungs and many other poor, persistent widows' children and grandchildren's lungs are at stake. So No Coal in Oakland is still organizing, still showing up, still refusing, along with all these other organizations like Sunrise, Interfaith, Climate Justice, still refusing to accept that this is inevitable. That is persistent, covenantal faith. Margaret was only able to sustain this work, I believe, for 50 years by building coalitions, by letting others lead, by knowing her limits, by choosing what she'd fight for and what she'll release. And we've been living this here too. We've been living into our vision. We know so much more about the history of these hills, this unceded Ohlone land. We know that Black families were systematically barred from home ownership through the same redlining. That's why coal's trains will poison Black and brown lungs today, still living in the flatlands because of redlining. We claim so many acronyms I can't keep up. ONA, Green, Jubilee, ICJJ. Because we follow in the ways of Jesus. Prophetic, inclusive, faithful, truthful, persistent ways. And over again, we persist. There's big band fundraisers. There's Trail of Tears movie night, supporting Sogorea Te, Black Wealth Builders Fund, providing assistance and accompaniment to those living in fear now of being deported, those unjustly imprisoned. And this is all important. And this is older than the universe itself. It's what the prophets spoke about. But we need to remember this movement is bigger than us, will outlive us all. And so the questions I think for us to pray about persistently in the upcoming weeks are harder and much more personal, because we have privilege, clean air, citizenship, home ownership. And so what does this demand of us? but also to ask ourselves, what about when we are the widow? When we are exhausted, when we are overwhelmed, carrying burdens that are about to break us? Jeremiah says, the law is written in all of our hearts, not just the oppressed. So what does your heart say? Maybe it's saying, show up for this. Maybe it's saying, I need to rest. Maybe it's saying, we can't keep doing this. Maybe something needs to change. Maybe this arrangement isn't sustainable, and we need to make hard choices. All of it is written on your heart. Persist in prayer. And persist in faith. Systems don't change because power becomes enlightened. They change because people unite together and refuse to go away. But remember this too, those of you who are empathizing more with the widow goes home. She sleeps, she eats. She lets someone else knock on the door tomorrow. Jesus did too. He rested. He got away from it all. He enjoyed good wine and food. And sometimes he slept when he needed to, even inconveniently on a boat during the storm. He took Sabbath because persistence is not burnout. It's sustainable resistance for the long term. God has written justice into each one of our hearts, into our DNA, our bodies. You already know what you need to know for yourself. And you have a sense of what you need to know for this faith community. So take a breath with me and ask yourself, what do I know is right that I haven't acted on yet? Maybe it's show up at the bridge, maybe it's give to Sogoria Te, or maybe it's just, we can't keep doing this. We need help. Whose door do we knock on? All of this is faithfulness. Jesus asks, will we find faith on earth? I think he found it last Thursday morning on the bridge. I think he's finding it in West Oakland right now. Margaret's still knocking, even after losing in court. I think Jesus has been finding it since before the universe began and will continue long after we're gone. And the question is whether we'll keep showing up sustainably, focused, choosing what we can actually carry until every door of injustice is thrown open. And the good news is we're all in it together, and God is bigger than all of us. Amen.